People, unfortunately, are burdened with a lot of different things, but like try to find a mentor or someone that you can learn from and be coached from who can help you with that entry point.
Welcome to Rep Matters, a podcast for sales professionals who are eager to build their business acumen and become top performers. In each episode, your hosts, Zoya Segelbacher and Caroline Jones, explore the real-life experiences, obstacles, and triumphs of salespeople. With an emphasis on authenticity and storytelling, listeners gain valuable insights into the strategies, mindsets, and skills that drive success in sales. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Rep Matters. This episode is brought to you by Marketers in Demand. Marketers in Demand has in-depth videos, podcasts, and articles from some of B2B's most in-demand marketers. Today, our guest is Jacob Karp. Jacob has spent the last 10 years in enterprise sales with the last 5 years in enterprise software sales. He has over 20,000 hours as an enterprise seller across multiple industries and has sold as part of public and private organizations ranging from startup to mature. His unique experience across industries has allowed him to sell into a wide range of executive stakeholders, including the CIO, CISO, CFO, CRO, and CMO. He is the author of Revenue on Repeat, and we'll definitely be diving into that. But quick little summary is it's a 40-plus page sales guide that helps sellers master the fundamentals of pipeline generation and conversion to close more revenue. So, Jacob, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you both for having me. I'm super excited to be here and looking forward to a fun conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. I remember first getting connected with you because I saw the honesty as a service tagline on LinkedIn. I knew I wanted to learn more. Can you tell us what that phrase or operating principle means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, it's one that comes up quite a bit. Actually, when I was interviewing for my current role, the panel was like, so tell us about this tagline you have. And really what it boils down to is I'm just a deep believer in transparency, honesty, and integrity, both like in your life as a whole, but also especially in sales. I think your word and your reputation is everything, and doing right by people is part of that. So it's something I firmly believe in, and I feel like it's kind of like helped guide me through my personal and professional life. So I stick with it.
Love that. Have you ever had, like, I'm sure you have actually, but like where you're so honest and you find out that like it's not a good fit? You were so honest that early on the prospect disqualified themselves. Can you give us an example of what that's been like and how that felt? I feel like to some listeners that might feel like one of the worst things in the world, but I don't know. I have my own opinions. I kind of want to hear from you how that goes.
Yeah, it's actually like a question that I love. I think now, like a little more advanced in my career, like I want that. I want to be so honest and so transparent, like early on, that people disqualify or we mutually disqualify, because I don't want to waste their time or mine. Earlier in my career, though, it was still that way, but I didn't really know how to like handle it, right? So I'm not sure that I always got to that point like early in a sale, but there were definitely some times later in a sale that happened. And there's one instance in my first year in software sales, which I was very bad at my job. I had one deal that honestly, if I closed it, could have changed like everything for me in that year. But we got deep into the process. We were teeing up like the implementation, the SAO, like you name it, the integration, all the things. And my team internally kind of said, hey, we can make this work. It's not going to be great for them. It's going to be more expensive than they want it to be. It's going to be more like cumbersome from a time and resource perspective. It's honestly just not a great fit. And I had to make a decision because my attainment was very low at the time. I had to make a decision, like, do I continue on with this knowing that it's not going to be great for them? Or do I just sort of rip the Band-Aid off? We had that conversation. My champion thanked me profusely. I think he went on to buy the other solution that probably had the same problems, but that's always stuck with me. I gave up a commission check and quota attainment. I ended up getting laid off from that job for lack of attainment. But like, I wouldn't change it at all because again, like back to honesty as a service and just being real with people, like I feel good about that today still in my career. And I just think it's something that for anyone who's listening, like regardless of the stage you're at in your career, like get very comfortable with being so real that you can disqualify out early and often because it will save you and your prospect time and heartache.
Yeah. I think that's really hard in practice because I have to imagine you had sales managers and other people within the organization supporting you bringing the customer on, right?
Yeah, definitely. And look, like if we're real with ourselves and we've all been far enough in our career of selling, we've seen and heard things that we might not agree with. That's not a reflection on that organization. It's more just when there are revenue targets to hit, like if you can find a way to make something happen, a lot of times I think people will side in that direction. I'll hand it to the team that I worked with, my leadership team. Like they accepted my decision and accepted my honesty, and it was best case for everyone. Because here's the flip side, right? And you will both know this. If you bring on a customer and you cannot actually meet the things you said you were going to do, you're going to have customer satisfaction issues. They're going to churn. Like those are not good for your numbers later. And good leadership will look at that and say, like, we're better off not having this customer than having them and have all these problems later and then have like negative NRR and all these things. So
Yeah, I hope that the industry is moving in that direction, realizing that the revenue that actually makes an impact for any organization is the renewal, the upsell, the happy customer. Like that upfront signing, we live and die by it, but it isn't
yeah,
actually what moves the needle for the business.
yeah, I'm in agreement. I think, for sellers on that are listening, like regardless of the time in your career, like understanding that for yourself, I think is an important beacon because when you sort of like internalize that and realize like what's going to be good for your business as a seller, you will act accordingly going forward, right?
Well,
For sure.
if we back it up a little bit, you have a really interesting story in how you got into sales. I know it involves baseball, it involves PR, and it sounds like it involves like a very reluctant young Jacob to get into
Mhm.
sales anyway. Can you kind of tell us how that got started?
Yeah, sure. So I've shared this story on LinkedIn and other places, and it's part of who I am, right? So I grew up playing baseball. I grew up wanting to only play baseball. I dreamed of playing Major League Baseball. I don't know that I was ever good enough to do that, but I definitely had it in my brain that I was going to make it happen. So that was really like my singular pursuit, honestly, until I was like 20. Like I went to junior college only to play baseball, ended up getting injured. My baseball career ends. And I had that moment where you're like, okay, now what do you do? And I realized, hey, you're not stupid. Like you may have pretended you were at sometimes in your younger days, but like you need to go to school, you need to get a degree. And something that I've always loved to do outside of that baseball world was write and communicate. So I actually got a journalism degree. I specialized in strategic media, which we'll call public relations. And I spent the first 5 years of my career in media and public relations. And that was like the beginning of like, how do I tell stories for a brand, for a product, for a service? And I didn't realize that it was kind of sales, right? I've had this like negative stigma about sales that I think a lot of us may have had at some point in our life. But I realized like over that time, like you're selling by telling these stories, creating these, you know, narratives, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't feel like gross, like you thought it might, right?
I was curious today, how does that writing interest and skill of yours play out in your sales conversations in your career?
Yeah, I think so. Let's pretend that I've never written on anything on LinkedIn, which obviously I was gonna be like, dude, that's all you do, it seems like some days. Um, But before I did the LinkedIn thing, like what I quickly realized is that one of my superpowers in sales was the ability to actually like write these narratives, write these business cases, write solid copy for prospecting emails, like write in a way that was level set enough with people that they would understand I'm not like a marketing jargon robot, but also in a way to draw them in to have the conversation. So that was something that I realized early on, like good at writing prospecting material, good at getting people to meetings, good in meetings, but like my kind of like superpower on top of that was writing these narratives for business cases, for proposals, for like champion decks, champion emails that they get to send off to their boss. So that was part of it. Now, the wonderful world of LinkedIn, like I get to stand up on a LinkedIn soapbox every day and write something. And it's not an algo hack. This is what's interesting about it. Like I just love writing, and it's a daily exercise of writing about something.
We're seeing this trend with top sellers.
Every episode, man. Yeah, so cool.
Yeah. It's also funny because I feel like my journey's been from the opposite side. Like I got into sales pretty early, and I was just around really good sellers and really strong salespeople. And I noticed that they were all very good at narratives and stories and like the way they deliver, what it is that they're selling. And I feel like now I'm very interested in marketing, and I was never in my life hired to do marketing, but it's just funny how the longer you're in sales, or maybe if you come from marketing, the longer you're in marketing, you start to realize like the lines just like bleed together.
Yeah, I don't really think that, especially for sellers and ICs, like I don't think that they're really siloed functions anymore. I think a lot of us have taken the two things and combined the two of them into our world. Now, in companies, they might still be a little siloed. I think that alignment is getting better, or some people will still chirp that it's not. But like for us as sellers, I think we realize like we have this core function of sales, but if you can bring in like your own go-to-market and marketing, like the way you want to do it through narratives, through LinkedIn, through whatever, it actually like increases the things you're doing on the sales side and creates better velocity, better traction, exposure, you name it.
Yeah, I think I had a very limited view of the individual contributor path for a while. I remember talking about like, I got to keep my blinders on. Like, marketing has a question for me? No. Like, other team wants to shadow me? No, I don't have time for that. Especially in enterprise, like, it is your job to be woven into the organization because ultimately that pays dividends. It's just figuring out where that valued time is best spent, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the enterprise, especially like the larger enterprise or strategics, you're not closing a deal by yourself. Like if you do, you're an amazing lone wolf. Unfortunately, you might be labeled that, but like you're some amazing prodigy that the rest of us aren't. Like it is going to require your entire internal ecosystem to help you get that deal across. And then like things you talked about earlier, like that NRR piece, that ecosystem then has to enable that second part of it for you. So like your ability, we talk a lot about external champions. Like I got to build my champion. The best sellers I know, and some of the best like business people I know, have like a very solid lineup of internal champions who will go to bat for them, who will help them get deals done, who will stand on a call with them to tell the customer, here's where we're headed. And I think like that these days is critical to getting, especially enterprise level deals done.
Yeah. We just had an interesting conversation about AI, and I think there's an opportunity for our time to be freed, automating what we can with AI to make those connections better. You mentioned, Jacob, like top performers, right? And you and I have DM'd a little bit about this. What's your perspective on the balance between learning from others and emulating top performers and being yourself?
Yeah, it's such a deeply woven question and so important as people go through their careers. So when I think about where I failed early on, I thought that I knew everything. I didn't know anything. So I thought that I was smarter than everyone else. I can go take like what I'd learned in past lives, whether that was PR marketing or the first 5 years of my career were not in software, they were in hardware sales. And it was very much like, hey, I'm coming to your town. Let's play golf. Let's go to dinner. Like it wasn't overly strategic, right? It was very hospitality based. I thought that I could take things like that and translate them into the software world. Like there is some of that. But what I quickly realized is like I was leaning on past experiences that didn't translate or track to what I was supposed to be doing. But I was so stubborn and I'll call it arrogant that I wasn't willing to like listen to that little voice or people around me. So I failed, and I failed miserably. And when I left my first role where I got laid off, I had to like look in the mirror and basically ask myself like, okay, in round 2, are you going to do the same thing, or are you going to just be coachable, have the humility of what you just went through, and be willing to like open up and take people's constructive criticism and coaching? And that was the difference. And to wrap up like kind of your core question, that was where I realized like you need to look at the people around you who are successful, take things from them that they're doing well that you think would work with you, but then make it your own. Because if you don't make it your own, you're essentially just roboting or parroting somebody else's talk track or delivery, and it's never really you. The authenticity isn't there.
That's really powerful. Powerful that you were able to like give yourself that feedback as well. I think, part of what makes us great as salespeople is that, I don't know, there's something about most of us that is just like confident, right? Whether it's earned or unearned. You're not going to be able to influence someone in the way that, sellers are able to if you don't believe in yourself, believe in your product. But on the flip side, sometimes, and this goes for anyone, even people who aren't in sales, but like, it's hard. It can be hard to take feedback, or it can be hard to know that you have all of this experience. I talk a lot to people who are like shifting careers. I work to bring people into tech sales. And so I'm always saying like, be confident in the fact that you have this experience, even if it's like not one-to-one transferable. There are these certain things that are transferable. How did you get to that point where you were open to it? Like where you moved from, no, I like the golf thing worked. Like I had great success in hardware. Like what happened mentally for you to be able to come out on the other side and be curious to what other people were doing?
Yeah, I think it was the fact that, so when I was in hardware sales, I wanted to work in software because my friends who were super talented, like super sharp, they were working in software. It seemed very challenging. They were learning a ton. They were also making a lot of money. That part always kind of helps, right? But there were reasons I wanted to do it. And when I was in hardware, I couldn't get a look in software because people were just like, it's just so different. And I didn't buy into that at the time. I was like, that's, garbage. Like, come on. I also was a VP in hardware, which is only to say that like I had like this two-sided thing that was keeping me from going to software. One, I'm in hardware. I don't have software experience, so no one wants to give me a chance. And two, I'm at this elevated title and no one can understand why I want to go be an IC or an AE in software. So when I finally got the chance to work in enterprise software and then I failed, I was like, listen, like you got the door open. You have a chance to go redeem yourself. Like self-awareness is key, right? You can either turn and run away and go back to your old world, which would have been fine, or you can like go the uncomfortable route where you go back into this. You come from a place of like, you've been, humbled, and you're willing to learn and be coached to go to success. And then part of it, Zoya, was like, I'm going to take that route. I took that route, but I knew that if it didn't work out, at least I tried again, right? And I came from a place of like open acceptance. And then if it didn't work out time 2, you might say like, maybe this isn't for me, but at least I tried it. And I didn't just run away and sort of do like the scared mentality, like I'm not good enough for this. I'm just going to go back to what I know.
Yeah, it's powerful. And comes back to integrity. I think it's related to the original question we started with. Jacob, we talked a little bit about people transitioning, right? You move from hardware to software. Zoya mentioned people that she works with Uncapped, and a lot of the listeners to our show are looking to transition into tech sales or are looking to level up their game in tech sales. Do you have any other advice for people coming from some other industry into software sales?
Yeah, I think you always have to be thinking about upscaling and up leveling, like just generally speaking, before you're even trying to do it, right? So like, what are the resources, like what are the learning areas that you can focus in on while you're trying to get in? So that's part of it. I would say, and this is harder than ever because people unfortunately are burdened with a lot of different things, but like try to find a mentor or someone that you can learn from and be coached from who can help you with that entry point. And then also, this is something I tell people, especially that are trying to either break in or trying to go up market with their sales career, learn the lingo and learn the levers that run the business. So imagine that you are, and this was actually true for me. So this will be a good example. So I'm in hardware. Like we talk about a forecast. In hardware, you give a forecast so they can produce a widget that then goes through a factory that has to be shipped to somebody. Like it's this whole other thing, right?
Yeah.
Like when you come to software, you're talking about a forecast. You're talking about different stages. Do you have a champion involved? Like, is there an EB no go? Like, it's just like wildly different. So had I even understood the differences in that, I probably earlier on might have been able to make an entry point or at least have intelligent conversations about how the software business runs. It's ARR or ACV. It's not like gross profit margin like the hardware business. It's just all these things. Like you have to think about where you are today and you have to think about like, what do I need to understand about this place I'm trying to go so that I can start to like upskill, educate myself. And then if I run into a VP of sales for a software company when I'm not in software, I can have an intelligent conversation about how I prospect, how do I design my territory, how do I run forecast calls, what the heck is medic? Like I didn't even know what medic was, right? Because it just was such a different scenario.
I love that you bring up this point because I have worked with SDRs and I've worked with SDRs who were calling C-level folks to set meetings. And one of the biggest challenges was depending on, their life experiences, they had very different experiences, very different business conversations prior to that. And then, they were getting on phone calls with these C-level folks at all kinds of companies of various sizes. So how did you close that gap? Like going from, again, you were in one industry working enterprise level accounts, but still like you're saying, like they were like worlds apart. Like what are some activities that you did to kind of close that gap in your understanding and be able to meet these senior leaders like where they were and speak their language?
Yeah. So again, that first year I fail, I get laid off. I'm at this like rock bottom place. I get a job at App Dynamics and I will credit App Dynamics and the leadership there, my direct leadership and leadership in general. Like it was a tough place to assimilate to because it was hardcore, but not in like a bad way. Just like you had to really know what you were doing and I didn't. So a lot of it was like being around top sellers, being around leaders who taught you what all of that stuff meant. Like, hey, you have 50 accounts. You need to figure out what the top 15 are or whatever you decide. You need to learn about their business. You need to understand, create a POV, create a hypothesis. Like that informs your prospecting. Like these are things I didn't even know, right? Because I came from this world where I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in Portland, Oregon. Let's play golf. So now it's like, I'm like reaching out to some C-level person somewhere like, hey, I saw that you told the market that your growth trajectory is going to be this. These are your revenues. Like from what I read in your quarterly report, like there's some risks that could actually keep you from getting there. So it's just like this whole like paradigm mindset shift. And then just understanding like business acumen. I think you mentioned SDRs, like that's the hardest job in sales. I'll say it again. Like that is, I never even did it, but it's the hardest job in sales. But if you have the guts to be able to call C-level people and hit them with like a 30-second thing, that is the hardest part. Now go learn business acumen, go learn about business as a whole, because then those SDRs, as they graduate through their lives and careers, like you could have a 30-minute conversation with the C-level person. You could have a 3-hour conversation because you're talking about the levers of their business, the growth, the trajectory, what are the risks and challenges, like what's going to keep you from getting there, personal win, professional win. It's just like this crazy, once you like open your mind and you start to learn, you just go like 0 to 60 really quickly and it's really fun.
Yeah, I think it's really important to take two gems from what you just said, Jacob, like learning the software language, like the dialect that will be used in the software company you work for, and learning the dialect of the people you're going to be talking to. What language do they use? How do they talk about their problems? Depending on who you're selling to, you might be coming from manufacturing, working for a tech company that sells into manufacturing. Then you have a leg up. But you do have to understand how people are speaking about their business, the kinds of acronyms and lingo that they use.
Totally. I mean, I'm sure you both heard this, or the listeners have heard this. I think what's the quote? Like you get delegated to who you sound like, right? And there's actually power in that if you do it the right way. because there are times when you want to go have like a more technical or in the weeds conversation. So like you're going to go in with that sort of like messaging or talk track. But then when you need to go to this C level, like they don't care what your technology does. Let's just say it. Like the speeds and feeds, the features, like they don't care. It's like, does it get me from like where I am today to like solving this problem that either helps me get my bonus, helps me hire more people, helps me keep my job? That's all they care about. So it's like this crazy, you're like mid-level, and then all of a sudden you're like, and now let's go talk about like the risk to your revenue over here.
I'd love to talk a little more about App Dynamics because you joined at an interesting time. Cisco had acquired the company 2 years previously, and I think it's been a formative experience for you based on what you shared about kind of learning as you were growing there. Can you tell us more about what you learned in that role?
Yeah, and it was an interesting time, and I actually am like super happy the way that it was because so I joined like 2 years post acquisition by Cisco, and to Cisco's credit, they let us run a BU. We were assimilated into Cisco, and we worked with core Cisco sellers, but they kind of just like let us run because the App Dynamics like mindset mentality was still very startup-y, like working really hard, like going the extra mile, learning at like this crazy pace. So it was cool because we got to continue to do that. We got to continue to have the startup mindset where I learned all these things. It was so formative, like you mentioned. But I also got to see what it was like to be part of like a massively mature business. Like Cisco's like billions and billions of dollars. Like, I don't know the count. I think it was 100,000 employees at the time. And what was really cool is you got to work in like almost like an incubator, like you're in your own little like startup BU in this company. And then you got to go work with the core Cisco sellers, their customers, their big enterprise customers. And you got to see like the entire landscape. Hey, here's how we operate as App Dynamics. Like we're startup mindset, medic, we're PG, 3Ys, like all this stuff you probably heard. And then you go to Cisco and it was a little bit different, but it was like interesting to go have the conversation with their end customers and understand how big business thinks about life. So
So
That's very
interesting
cool.
to think about the startup pace and culture within a larger organization. Sounds really
and
interesting.
listen, like it would be unfair to say there wasn't friction. There was friction. There were certain people on the Cisco side who weren't comfortable with the way we operated.
Mm.
I think again, where I found my middle ground with people was going back to where we started this conversation on just being like honest, transparent. I can be direct, but I'm never like aggressive or rude. Like that is not my way. So it was just this cool situation where you get to like kind of enable these people you're working with, like, hey, here's how I run my business. Here's how I can help you. Like, hopefully you're comfortable with it because we can go do some really cool things. If you're not, I still have to go do what I told you I'm going to do. So, like, we can work on this cohesively, or we can be sort of like this fractured situation, and that's not good for the end customer.
I think in addition to App Dynamics, you've been at a couple of other organizations over the years and in enterprise sales, right? I'd love to bring some definitions into this conversation because strategic roles within enterprise teams can change over
Yeah.
depending on the organization that you're in. So, how would you define your market and focus now? And how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, so it's interesting timing. I actually just changed roles and teams internally at Rubrik. And I actually now am supporting 7 reps as we're not an overlay, it's the wrong word. We're not really a specialist. We're more of just, I guess we are specialists. Like they can call us whatever they want. But for the last 10 years, I have had anywhere from 10 to 30 accounts. 30 accounts being like the max. And really at the end of the day, I cared about 10. I knew everything I could about those 10. Like that's where my brain lived, right? So that was that true enterprise mindset. I need to know everything about them. Generally speaking, they're publicly traded companies. So I need to read all the quarterly reports. I got to listen to the earnings transcripts. I got to know everything that's going on. I got to know where like the CISO, where he likes to go to dinner, like where his kids go to high school, not to be creepy, but you start to know all this stuff as an enterprise seller. And so that was fun because I got to learn so much about businesses. How do I approach like things we've talked about earlier? I now align to and support 7 reps in our company. So I have the purview of seeing around 1,000 accounts, something like that. And it's this crazy mindset shift that I'm actually super excited about. But what's cool about it is my mentality is the same, just at scale. So I'm still thinking, like, what are the top 20% of accounts? So I guess that would be 200. It probably is going to be less. What's the top 10% of accounts? The top 100 that, like, I know if I crack a couple of those, I will make or blow out my number. Because the biggest thing I see younger sellers struggle with, especially ones who have like a ton of accounts, is a lack of prioritization and stack ranking, which then means like they spend their time scattershotting all over the place. So it's cool to take like what I've done the last 10 years and test it on this bigger kind of like data model. It might not work. Like I might have to change the way I'm thinking about things, but it's exciting to be like, all right, I get to now take this thing I think I've honed in on and see if it works in other places.
That's very cool. And it is fun. You'll have to report back on how it goes. It's fun that you're faced with the challenge of having almost 1,000 accounts and like
Yeah, it's
honing in on the right
crazy.
ones.
Well, it's crazy because like I just don't even some days know how to think about it. I'm in like the early innings of conceptualizing how to address it. But like again, sort of always circling back to where we started in this conversation. What's cool is I know that like what you did before doesn't always translate into success and something new. So I'm like going back to that mindset of like, all right, we're going to try this, but if it doesn't work, this approach doesn't work, like I'm going to have to shift. And guess what? Like I might have to go talk to some folks that are mid-market, SMB, like I don't know, like they have a better approach for this potentially. So I'm learning on the flip side as well with people who might look at me and be like, why would that guy ask me a question? I'm like, I want to know how you guys do it.
Yeah, there's always something to be learned. So tactically, are you the manager of the other reps or like their mentor helping them break in?
No, I guess I'm a specialist. Like I'm a specialist that aligns to 7 reps. I'm using my wording carefully, not because I care what they call me, but like there's this whole debate about what we're called. I
Yeah.
basically am an overlay specialist, like whatever you want to call me, right? Who knows like one part of our platform deeply. So
Cool. What role does a manager play for you now? I was curious, you're experienced, you don't need any babysitting, but how do you think about your relationship to management at this point in your career?
yeah, and this is a really good question that I think a lot of us who are like a little more tenured in our career are thinking through. Here's the nice thing. I don't have an ego. So I think at the end of the day, regardless of how far I've come or what my age is or years in the business, like someone who's my leader, like my first question I'm asking them is like, what do you need to go do for your boss? Right. And this is for people who are listening. You should always kind of think this way. Like, what do they need to go report on? What metrics do they need to hit? Because I want to align to those and do things that help them get to that. So, like, that's part of it. I think that specifically in this new role, this part of our platform is not somewhere I've spent a lot of time understanding technically. So, like, my leader now he understands it deeply. So, like, I'm very lucky because he's going to give me that kind of like base of knowledge. But from a leadership perspective, a lot of times what it becomes is, people will use this term like blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I will need things here like executive alignment. I'll need him to sit on a call. I'll need help from like the strategic perspective, but a lot of it on the day to day is tactical blocking and tackling. Like, get this out of my way or like help me accomplish this internally. And so it's like this team mentality where there's partially strategic stuff. Like I need to learn, I need to understand how to approach these personas, have these conversations. But then there's tactical stuff like dumb stuff like, hey, I can't quote this because like some alignment's off in Salesforce. Like someone's got to help me.
Right.
That I feel like that's rules to live by, like even for people who are more junior, like thinking about what's going to help your boss. It also, I feel like if you operate that way, even if you're more junior, it makes it so that you don't end up just like having to report, right? Like doing the
Yeah. I think you
things
buy yourself, Zoya, I think you buy yourself like leeway and credibility. Don't take advantage of that ever. But like what I've learned is by thinking that way, by asking them those questions, and then by like forward operating that way without them having to ask me, like for people listening, the mindset I take is like, if you ever have to come down my street and ask me for something that I should have already done, that's not on you as my leader. That's on me that I didn't do it, because that was like we settled on that was something I had to do as like table stakes, and I'm sorry. So it's always that mentality. And then for people who are thinking about going into leadership or going up the stack, if you're thinking about what the people 1 or 2 rungs above you need, you're already formulating your mindset for when you potentially get there. And I just think it's a good way to think and operate.
Anticipating needs. That's what sellers do too.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, we have so many questions for you, and I know we're starting to get to the end, but I did want to ask you, in your revenue on repeat system, you commit to helping sellers exceed quota regardless of the conditions that we often point to when things aren't going well, especially these days, market conditions. Can you tell us about one foundational sales skill that you believe is economy proof?
Yeah, I can. I think I actually am going to give you 2 because I think they align together. I am a firm believer that one of the first things you should do when you take over a role or a territory is spend time prioritizing your accounts and stack ranking your territory and figure out where you want to spend your time. Like, I'm probably a broken record because I've said it here, but like doing a little bit of advanced research and data mining to set yourself up for like attacking that top 20%, however you deem it, is what I think will actually net out the most positive results, because you're spending your time in places that the signals are telling you there's a propensity to buy or a propensity to evaluate or have a conversation, right? And the beautiful thing is this, I'm like, if you have 1,000 accounts, you're not going to be able to do this across the whole thing. But if you stack rank effectively, if you start with that top 10 to 20%, and then like the second 30 to 50%, like that second tier, you kind of know some stuff. When the ones on the top fall out, you kick them to the curb and you bring something else up, and you're always giving yourself a place to generate pipeline. And I feel like that just works across every sector, every industry, every technology, because what you're really looking for is like, how do I generate pipe in a qualified manner or disqualify as quickly as possible, like we talked about earlier, so that I can focus on places where revenue will come.
Yeah, that's great. And Caroline, I was doing the like brainwave thing because I was actually, my head was headed to revenue on repeat as well. So thank you for that example. Can we even just go a little bit deeper? Like, can you tell us about kind of the origin of revenue on repeat, the purpose of it, who might benefit from reading it?
Yep. Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that because I'm pretty passionate about it. So we talked about my story, right? I have this first year in software sales where I just am terrible. I get laid off, and then I come back from this place of like, I have to learn everything from the ground up, right? So my time at App Dynamics was that 2+ years of learning that. But everywhere that I've worked since then runs like a similar process, playbook, mindset, whatever you want to call it. And what I've found is that the people that I work with in those places tend to be successful. And if they leave those places, they leverage that system to be successful somewhere else. So what it really is like 5+ years of my learning brain dumped into a document. And the origin of it was that, I post on LinkedIn, like tips, tricks, strategies, whatever. But like I got so much inbound about like people wanting to go deeper, and it didn't scale to have 30-minute conversations with everyone under the sun. So I just brain dumped it all. And really what it is, like that document, that 40 pages, is what I wish someone handed me on day one of that first software sales job, plus the enablement that every org does and does well. But like if you gave me that and I got to read those 40 pages and built my system off of that, like it would have probably been very different. So it was really the ability to give that back to people at what is basically a very affordable price, to say like, go use this. I'm here to answer questions, but like build a system off this and tell me like how I can help you additionally.
I love that. And I love the name because I don't know, it does make me think that you could just take it wherever your career takes you, right? Like install that system wherever you go.
I mean, I'm obviously a believer. And one thing too, for anyone who's listening, like if you purchase it or you're interested, like I am very serious about this. I answer my emails on my revenue on repeat, like Jacob Karp email. That's like this whole other thing. I answer those emails, I answer as many LinkedIn DMs as I can. It's much better to hit me by email. Because if you are to purchase something like that and then you have questions, like I see it as my duty to be like, okay, where is this not working? Or how can we tweak it? Like, let's make sure you're successful, because that was the whole reason you decided to make that investment or believe in what I wrote, right?
You post a ton of gems, and obviously people get revenue on repeat to get the full scoop. But what I appreciate about your presence on LinkedIn too is you post a lot about the importance of balance, of harmony in your life, of having a personal life outside of sales. How do you recharge?
Yeah, great question. And I have shifted in that direction because I think it's really important, especially for younger sellers, to be like, dude, you can't be attached to your job 24/7 and you can't live and die by the success of your job. Like it doesn't translate to real life. So the ways that I like to unwind, recharge, I'm married. I have 2 young daughters who I love to spend time with. They're 3.5 and 6 months. So it's like crazy, but super fun. If I have time to go do the things that I like to do outside, it's with them, or golfing, snowboarding, fly fishing. Live in Colorado, so I have to take advantage of those. But those are huge. Like without those, I think I would be a crazy person, because you can't sit on Zoom all day and prospect and be in these meetings and then like not have a real life outside of it.
Totally. We're getting to the end. We've got 2 questions that we like to ask everyone in the wrap up. I will go ahead and do the first one. So imagine we're 5 years from now, you see your name in headlines for following your passion and doing something big. What is that headline?
Oh man. Ooh. So, okay. This is a post I've made a couple times. I don't know if you guys read it or people might have. I have this dream of owning a ranch property outside of Steamboat in Colorado. And it's like my property, it has fly fishing on it, it has lodging on it, but it also has, it's a 501c3, so nonprofit. It has a dog rescue, a brewery, and a pizza place on site. So people just come and hang out. Hopefully they have a couple beers, have some pizza, and then they end up adopting a dog. Like that is in 5 years. I just want a place where people can just come hang out, take on the dog, and like be just happy.
That is amazing. And actually, Jen Allen Knuth's was about dog rescue as well. So we need to get everyone's headlines together and just create the coolest, most impactful nonprofit out there.
Oh yeah, I'm all for it. I'd love to have people involved.
Sounds so peaceful too. I'm like already imagining myself there. Cool. All right. What are you promoting and where can people find you?
Yeah, so people can find me on LinkedIn. Like I jokingly said, I'll be on my soapbox there probably every day. So come find me. And then promoting revenue on repeat. Please check it out. If you have questions, let me know. I also do some one-on-one coaching as well for sellers. That's both around like the fundamentals, the foundations, the systems, but also mental health is not the right word. Like compartmentalizing your life as a seller and understanding that like you have to go do these things, but also like how do we live a real full life outside of that? So those are the things that I'm passionate about and I'd love to talk with people about.
I love it. Well, everyone go follow Jacob. Go learn more about everything that he's providing to the sales community. Jacob, we loved having you on today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. It was super fun. I think we could jam for hours on this stuff, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Rep Matters, the podcast for sales professionals who become top performers. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow Rep Matters wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or access all episodes at marketersindemand.com/repmatters. See you next time.